In a hidden world, a monstrous warrior with an orc bloodline slaughters his way through elite assassins and genetically engineered zombies, all to protect a silver case. But he's not the main character. The real protagonist is hiding in the shadows, a 19-year-old boy dying of cancer, whose only weapon is his mind. After fate deals him the worst possible hand, Fong Ling decides to spit in its face and wage a one-man war to seize the miracle cure that can save him, even if it means stepping onto a battlefield of gods and monsters. The young man sat lost in thought, weighed down by the knowledge that he was in the final stage of lung cancer. The doctors had told him he probably had only a few months left, and he felt he should not burden himself with anything during this last stretch of his life. The thought hit him harder when he remembered his age, only 19, and yet facing something so cruel. His eyes widened in disbelief. Tears streamed rapidly down his face, and he began to cry heavily, wondering in anguish why God was doing this to him. Eventually, he lay down on his bed, convinced that this was truly the end for him. As he stared at the ceiling, he questioned why his time had to be so short. If so little remained, he wondered why he should even bother with work. Perhaps he should find something fun to do instead. His mind wandered to wild possibilities. He thought about whether there might be a beautiful girl, an alien, or someone with superpowers who would suddenly appear in his life. Even a beautiful monster girl or a ghost would be fine, he muttered under his breath. At that moment, his phone rang. He had received a message, and he wondered who it could be. When he opened it, his heart jolted. It appeared to be from someone in the future. The message asked if he wanted to change his fate. He accepted without hesitation. Whether it was real or not no longer mattered to him. He had nothing to lose, and he welcomed whatever adventure might come. The scene shifted to the front of an orphanage. In the quiet of night, an old woman placed a baby in a small box at the entrance. Without hesitation, she turned and walked away, leaving the child behind. A tag attached to the box bore the name Fong Ling Yen. 10 years passed. Late autumn rain poured over a bustling city, the streets alive with neon lights and hurried footsteps. Inside a small shop called No. 1 Bakery, 2 men spoke in hushed tones. One of them, concerned, told his friend Lao Yi that he had heard of his medical background. He explained that another friend of his, Fong Ling Yen, had gone for a checkup that day, and there had been something troubling in the results. Handing over the medical report, he asked Lao Yi to take a look. The report contained grim words. There was a shadow in Fong Ling Yan's lung, which might have a significant impact, and a malignant tumor could not be ruled out. Soon after, Fong Ling Yan called Lao Yi himself, hoping to hear a clearer opinion from someone who understood medicine. His eyes widened in shock as Lao Yi told him the truth. It was advanced-stage lung cancer, and there was no hope left. Lao Yi advised him to spend his remaining time eating and drinking as he pleased. After the call ended, Fong Ling's friend asked if this meant Fong Ling did not have long to live. Lao Yi gave his condolences, but quickly excused himself, saying he had other work, before going offline. Alone in his room, Fong Ling sat in silence, gritting his teeth. He muttered bitterly that he was only 19 years old and could not understand why this was happening to him. The words broke apart as he began crying rapidly, desperate and unwilling to face death. He whispered that first his relatives had passed away, leaving him alone, and then every day he had endured the disdainful looks of others. After all the funerals were done, fate had cruelly handed him the final blow, late-stage cancer. Cursing his fate, he demanded to know if destiny was simply toying with him. His anger surged, and he cursed again, calling fate a pack of dogs and damning the life he had been given. But his fury was cut short as he began coughing violently. Struggling for breath, he stood and grabbed a packet from a stool. As he opened it and began eating, he declared to himself that he was still alive. With a firm expression, he vowed that as long as there was any chance left, he would not give up. If death came, he would die fighting against fate itself. Between bites, he thought that if problems could not be solved through ordinary means, then he would turn to the abnormal. His mind flickered to the recent news, which had been filled with mysterious incidents and gang fights. Just then, his phone vibrated. A new transfer had arrived, and the system asked for verification. His monthly wage of 2,500 yuan from the auto repair workshop had been deposited. Seeing this, Fong Ling smiled faintly, remarking to himself that this would be his last income. The smile vanished a moment later as he coughed blood into his hands. Looking at his palm, slick with red, he pressed it against his mouth and forced himself to stand, whispering that he would never give up. Later, inside a grocery store, Fong Ling went to the bathroom to wash his face. As he wiped away the blood, he realized with dread that his body was deteriorating faster than he had expected. With the worsening bloody cough, he might even die from anemia before the cancer itself claimed him. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his ears, telling him it had found him. He froze, wondering where it had come from. Looking at the mirror, his breath caught. His reflection was gone. Instead, a black, wobbling distortion appeared where his face should have been. From it, a red hand burst out and seized him by the throat. Panic surged through him as he struggled against the grip. His lungs burned, starved of air, while in the mirror, a massive red eye stared directly at him. His lips formed the word "you" before his vision blurred, and he lost consciousness. An instant later, he slammed his hand against the basin, jolting awake. Nothing was there. His body was drenched in sweat, his breath ragged. He stared at his own reflection, relieved yet shaken, wondering what had just happened. Forcing himself to rationalize, he thought it must have been a hallucination, something brought on by his illness. Carrying his groceries, he muttered that he had heard cancer patients often experienced hallucinations before death, and perhaps he was worse off than he had realized. After paying his bill, he prepared to leave the store, though unease weighed on him. As he walked down the hallway, he noticed workers already cleaning, though by his memory the supermarket was not supposed to close until 10. Glancing at a clock, he froze. It was 9:42. That meant he had been inside the bathroom for over an hour and a half. His mind rebelled against the thought. Surely someone would have noticed him standing at the sink for so long. At the counter, the cashier simply told him the total was 123.5. After paying, he left silently, but his mind kept replaying the strange events. He decided he needed to get home quickly. At the exit, however, the scanner alarm blared as he passed through. A guard stopped him and ordered him to hand over what he had stolen. A nearby woman shouted at him, demanding how he dared to steal. Shocked, Fong Ling insisted he had not taken anything, but before he could explain further, another fit of bloody coughing racked his body. The guard scoffed, accusing him of being an experienced thief, pretending to be sick. Fong collapsed to his knees, still coughing, but the guard refused to believe him, swearing that he would not let another thief escape and embarrass him again. Raising his voice, he announced to the crowd that they had caught a thief, threatening Fong Ling with a beating if he did not stop pretending. A woman clenched her fist, preparing to strike him, mocking that she would slap him like his mother once did. Before she could act, chaos erupted. A truck smashed through the front of the store, crushing her instantly as blood sprayed across the air. The truck, overloaded with cars, plowed through the walls, leaving destruction in its path. Screams filled the store as panicked people cried out for help. Those outside rushed in, some shouting for ambulances, others trying to drag survivors from the rubble. One of them saw Fong Ling standing nearby and called for his help. Fong ran toward them but collapsed again, coughing blood. When asked if he was all right, he admitted weakly that it was simply the last stage of lung cancer. The man urged him to go home, telling him he looked too unwell to be of any use. Fong Ling apologized for being no help and stumbled away. As he walked down the street, the sound of cries and rescue efforts echoed behind him. He thought grimly that his condition was worsening. At this rate, he might not last even a few more days. Later, lying on his bed, he sighed heavily. So much had happened in just one day. His diagnosis, the hallucinations, and even the bizarre alarm at the supermarket. He realized that if the alarm had not gone off, he might have been standing in that aisle when the truck hit, and he too would have died. He questioned whether a scanner could malfunction on its own. It seemed unlikely. Checking his receipts, he found everything accounted for. Still uneasy, he patted his pockets, wondering if there was something unscanned with him. To his surprise, his hand found an object he did not recognize, an old phone. He wondered how it had gotten there. Perhaps it had been the cause of the alarm. The phone beeped, displaying a new message. Reading it, Fong Ling's eyes widened. The message explained that he was never supposed to see it. His natural fate had been to die tonight, at exactly 9:47 p.m., in a horrific car accident, his body unrecoverable. The message continued, telling him there was no time for answers. It acknowledged his late-stage cancer and the helplessness he felt while waiting for death. It asked if he had ever thought of changing his fate. Fong Ling gritted his teeth and admitted to himself that of course he had. Another message appeared. It instructed him to go to Pier 5 at Huichuan at exactly 12:17 a.m. on the night of the 13th to obtain a silver case. It warned him not to arrive early or late. The message ended with a chilling note. This would be his last chance. The clock ticked toward the late hours, its hands showing 11 o'clock. Fong Ling sat in his office, restless and determined. He told his manager that since it was already 11, they should continue working through the night. Turning to the computer, Fong Ling began his search. He entered the words Huichuan Port Number 5, Nido Town. The results startled him. The location did not exist on any satellite maps. Only scattered close-up images appeared, and even those lacked clear detail. It was not searchable in the usual sense, which struck him as deeply strange. Digging deeper, he discovered that Huichuan Port Number 5 had been abandoned for years. It lay 60 kilometers from the city center, remote and nearly forgotten. The nearest paved road was 2 kilometers away, with the only access being a dirt path. Calculating carefully, Fong Ling noted that if he left at 11:30 p.m. on his electric bike, he would arrive at the nearby road around 12:10 a.m. Given his failing health, walking the last stretch would take him precisely 7 minutes, meaning he would reach the port at 12:17 on the exact time mentioned in the message. He organized everything with meticulous care. The electric bike had been checked in advance and was unlikely to malfunction. The parking spot would be visible, so theft was not a concern. His phone was fully charged, his medicine packed, and some spare change tucked away. All that remained was to leave on time. Still, the doubts gnawed at him. What exactly would happen at Huichuan Port Number 5? Why had the mysterious message insisted that he must not arrive too early or too late? Could this truly change his fate? While Fong Ling finalized his preparations, 2 men observed him from the shadows. One carried a blade, the other bore a scar across his face. Their movements and hushed words revealed them to be thieves, and they lingered, waiting. Fong Ling, unaware of them, quietly took his pills, determined not to risk a seizure at a crucial moment. Rising to his feet, he readied himself, muttering that if everything went according to plan, there would be no problem. As he bent down to unlock his electric bike, the 2 men stepped forward. One asked where he was headed at such an hour, his voice laced with menace. The scarred man demanded he hand over everything he had. Fong Ling's heart sank at the timing. Of all moments, it had to be now. When he stayed silent, one thief shouted at him angrily, asking if he was deaf. Fong Ling thought quickly. If he could keep the bike, he might still make it to the port. A confrontation, however, would cost him precious time. With a strained smile, he held out his money and phone, begging them to take it all but let him keep the bike. The thieves were not satisfied. One yelled that he wanted everything and lunged forward. Trembling, Fong Ling's hand slipped, and his money fell to the ground. He muttered bitterly that he was such a coward he could not even hold onto cash properly. The insult worked. The thief glanced downward at the fallen money, and in that instant, Fong Ling struck. Exploding with sudden ferocity, he grabbed the man's head and drove his knee upward, smashing into his face. Blood sprayed as the thief screamed in agony. But victory was fleeting. The second thief slammed a brick into Fong Ling's skull. Blood streamed from the wound as his vision went dark. His body collapsed unconscious. Panicked, the thieves believed they had killed him. Without hesitation, they fled into the night. When Fong Ling opened his eyes again, he saw a figure standing over him. It was the manager calling his name, asking if he was all right. Dazed, Fong Ling held his head, trying to grasp what had happened. The manager explained that after a customer had paid and left, they suddenly returned, alarmed, saying Fong Ling had been lying outside on the ground. Sitting up weakly, Fong Ling demanded the time. His eyes widened when the manager told him it was 12:15. Cold sweat drenched his face. The plan had unraveled. Circumstances had gotten in the way once again. Forcing himself to his feet, he muttered bitterly that plans always fell apart when it mattered most. He mounted his electric bike, knowing he had no chance of arriving at 12:17 sharp. No faster transport could save him now. Still, he refused to give up. His only option was to contain the chaos, to risk everything despite the setback. As he rode off into the night, he muttered with grim determination that as long as a glimmer of hope remained, he would stake everything he had. Fong Ling finally arrived at Huichuan Pier, his steps quick and desperate as he ran toward the looming warehouse building. The moment he pushed open the heavy door, he exhaled in relief, as if merely crossing the threshold had lifted a weight from his chest. Inside, the building was cloaked in near total darkness. Clutching the ladder, Fong Ling began his ascent, but unease gnawed at him. Searching for the case in this black void would be close to impossible. He thought grimly that the smarter choice would be to first find a vantage point with a clear view. He climbed the creaking stairs, each step echoing faintly in the hollow structure. Suddenly, he coughed violently, his chest tightening. His face twisted with worry. Had his physical condition truly deteriorated so badly? Gritting his teeth, he pressed onward until he reached a window. Looking out into the night, his eyes caught sight of several cars parked outside. His brows furrowed. A Lincoln? Had someone arrived earlier than planned? He leaned closer, straining to see. What met his gaze froze him in shock. Scattered corpses, strewn across the ground. Fear jolted through him. What was happening? Why was everyone dead? Could this place have turned into a battlefield between rival gangs? He steadied himself, pulling away from the window. Now was not the time to panic. He had a mission, and the silver case was his only priority. Slipping a hand into his pocket, Fong Ling drew out a pair of binoculars. He lifted them to his eyes, scanning the bloody chaos below. His heart pounded as he searched desperately for the case. Frustration gnawed at him when he failed to spot it. Forcing himself to calm down, he steadied his hands and focused once more. Then there it was. The silver case, just as described in the message. But the sight turned his stomach. The handle of the case was clutched by a severed hand, still attached. Beads of sweat trickled down his face as dread weighed heavy on him. Yet, despite the horror, determination surged within him. He had to grab that case and, quickly. He rushed downwards, legs pounding against the wooden steps. The case was just 20 meters away, lying in the warehouse near the ground floor door. If he moved fast enough, he could take it before anyone else arrived. But then, a sudden flash of light caught his eye. His gaze snapped to the river. There, a boat was approaching the pier. Shock gripped him. Someone else was here. His mind raced. In his current frail condition, he couldn't fight, nor could he run. He forced himself to think. The only option was to hide and wait for the right moment. Darting away from the open floor, Fong Ling slipped into a side room. But the sight that greeted him made his blood run cold. A young girl lay sprawled on the ground, her lifeless body bathed in the glow of faint moonlight through the window. A knife was buried deep in her chest, blood splattered across the floor. Kneeling beside her, Fong Ling studied the wound. A fruit knife, he concluded grimly. He leaned closer, pressing his fingers gently beneath her nose to check for breath. Nothing. Her skin was already cold. She was long gone. Relief mingled with dread. At least she was dead. Had she been alive, his hiding place would have been compromised. Then, his ears caught it, the sound of the boat's engine cutting off. Silence pressed in around him. His thoughts sharpened. Who had arrived? Outside, The boat touched against the pier with a dull thud. From it stepped a man in glasses, a pistol glinting in his grip. Behind him followed another figure, masked, carrying a replica of Captain America's shield. The masked man glanced at the carnage and remarked that it seemed Fong had already taken the item. The man in glasses frowned slightly, muttering that they hadn't made it in time. Then he shrugged, unfazed. "That's fine," he said coolly. They advanced toward the warehouse, their footsteps steady. The man in glasses spoke again, his tone measured. After all, it was only a hidden side mission. B rank or higher. The boss made it clear, the main mission takes priority. Then his gaze caught something, and a sharp smile spread across his face. He gestured. "Look at this." There, on the ground, lay the silver case. His voice carried a thrill of satisfaction. "The main mission item is still here, safe and sound." The masked man crouched, inspecting it. "Looks like we got here before Fong did," he said. Opening the case, his eyes widened. "Ha! Reverse transcriptase carrier injector. A rare item for a hidden B rank mission. Getting this thing isn't easy." The man in glasses smirked, the light glinting against his lenses. "With this, we can approach the CEO with pancreatic cancer, and from there, obtain clearance into Area 51. From his hiding place, Fong Ling's breath caught. His eyes widened as the truth sank in. Reverse transcriptase carrier injector. That was the very object he had been told to find. According to his intel, the technology came from Nobel Prize, winning gene therapy research. It exploited the very roots of cancer, mutations in oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. Mutated genes were injected into the body, suppressing cancer at its source. He could hardly believe it. Did something like this truly exist? Clenching his fists, Fong Ling steeled himself. No matter what, he had to secure it. This was beyond mission, it was destiny. But then, the tense quiet was broken by a voice. "Oh, gentlemen," it drawled mockingly, "if you would, please don't touch my bag." A figure emerged from the shadows. His body was tense, his torso bare, muscles defined under the moonlight. In one hand, he carried something grotesque, the severed head of a girl, her hair dangling lifelessly. His tone was sharp and cold. "I only left to chase down a fleeing target. Just because I was gone for a moment doesn't mean I gave up my prize." Fong stood shirtless in the dim light, his lean yet hardened frame revealed in the tense silence. His eyes narrowed as he warned the bespectacled man not to touch his belongings. The man with glasses, clearly startled at Fong's sudden appearance, froze. He had not expected to come face to face with him here. At Fong's side, the masked man immediately readied his shield, bracing himself for conflict. The glasses-wearing intruder, however, quickly raised his weapon and pointed it toward Fong, though his voice trembled with caution rather than hostility. He insisted there was no conflict of interest between them, claiming he had only received intel and had come to investigate. He emphasized that he had no intention of making Fong his enemy. Narrowing his eyes further, the man with glasses attempted to negotiate. He proposed that both sides should step back, he would return the reverse transcription vector syringe, and Fong should allow them to leave unharmed. Fong's lips curved into a strange smile. He remarked that it was quite the coincidence, since he had been about to suggest the same arrangement. He implied that they were on the same wavelength. His tone then shifted into something oddly casual as he suggested that perhaps they might even meet again someday, maybe over a drink. From a distance, Fong Ling, who had been hiding and observing the entire exchange, clenched his teeth in frustration. His thoughts raced. A drink? If they don't fight here, does that mean my chance is gone completely? If I don't get that bag, I'm as good as dead. The glasses man smirked with a touch of malice. He accepted Fong's suggestion, replying that he knew a place that served incredible drinks and even offered to treat him tomorrow night. With a sudden burst of enthusiasm, Fong pumped his fist in the air and declared that it was a deal. The masked man and his partner both exhaled a sigh of relief, believing the danger had passed. But in the very next instant, Fong's expression shifted. His strange grin vanished, replaced by a cold, predatory stare. He opened his hand, revealing a small, glowing yellow orb resting in his palm. Within moments, the object began to flash violently. It was a stun bomb. From his vantage point, Fong Ling shielded his eyes from the blinding burst of light and muttered in disbelief. A flash bomb? No respect for the rules of combat. The sudden detonation forced the masked man into action. With a roar, he hurled his massive shield toward Fong, shouting that he had known Fong would try to pull a dirty trick like this. Fong braced himself, eyes alight with exhilaration. As the shield hurtled toward him with devastating force, he lunged forward, seizing it with both hands. The sheer impact pushed him backward, his feet dragging across the ground as the weight threatened to overwhelm him. In that moment, Fong's blood surged. His body convulsed as he unleashed the power of his orc bloodline. His form transformed grotesquely, his teeth lengthened into animalistic fangs, coarse hair erupted across his chest and arms, and his muscles swelled with monstrous vigor. But the masked man was unimpressed. With cold disdain, he muttered that the transformation was pathetic. The shield slipped from Fong's hands and slammed into his stomach with bone-crushing force. Blood spurted from Fong's mouth as the blow launched him through the air, sending him crashing violently into a nearby truck. As the shield snapped back into its master's grip, the masked man suddenly noticed something alarming, a visible crack running along its surface. He cursed aloud, recognizing that the cost of that exchange had been far too high. The strike had damaged his prized weapon. Without wasting a moment, he barked an order to his comrade. "Sotan, move." The glasses man, Sotan, lifted his gun and fired. The sharp crack of gunfire echoed as his bullet struck the truck, forcing it to lurch around. Without hesitation, Sotan leapt toward the vehicle, reporting that they had lost visual contact with Fong. The masked man's voice was grim as he commanded Sotan to finish Fong off. Landing beside the truck, Sotan raised his weapon again, cursing Fong as he prepared to fire into the wreckage. But before he could pull the trigger, a sudden burst of light blinded him. Fong had triggered another flash bomb from within the truck. Disoriented and staggering, Sotan could barely react before a dark shape lunged out of the wreckage. Fong emerged with feral speed, hurling a heavy bag directly at Sotan. The impact caught him midair. Blood splattered across the night as the bag struck his face with brutal force, sending him spiraling. The masked man cried out his comrade's name, his tone filled with alarm. But before he could reach him, Fong appeared in front of him in an instant, moving with terrifying speed. His grin was savage as he warned the masked warrior to worry about himself first. With a roar, Fong swung his fist toward his opponent. The masked man raised his shield just in time, blocking the devastating punch. The two forces clashed, sparks flying. From his hiding spot, Fong Ling watched the chaos unfold, his heart pounding in his chest. His eyes widened as he tried to process what he was seeing. He could scarcely believe it. What are these things? Could it be this world isn't normal at all? Fong Ling watched the chaos unfold from the safety of a window, his mind racing as he tried to piece together the logic of what he was witnessing. He reasoned that the very existence of such powerful beings meant that his own chances of survival might increase, provided he played his cards carefully. On the battlefield below, Fong's relentless assault forced the masked man onto the defensive. The shield clashed against Fong's fists, but one strike slipped through, creating an opening. Before Fong could press the advantage, Sotan's voice rang out from behind, calling out coordinates. Fong turned his head just in time to avoid the incoming gunfire, dodging by leaping aside. The masked man was stunned that even in his injured state Fong could still react with such precision. Taking cover behind a truck, Fong clutched a stone and shouted that he was blind, urging his enemies not to move. With a sudden throw, he launched the stone towards Sotan. The masked man shouted a warning, but it struck true. Fong followed by kicking the truck, sending it crashing into the masked man. With a mocking grin, he warned his opponent not to rush, promising that his turn would come. Again, Fong lunged with a punch, blocked by the shield. Fong Ling, still observing, thought the fight had tilted in Fong's favor, but then realized something unsettling. Fong was gravely wounded, yet his strength seemed to grow the more injured he became. Otherwise, how could a single fighter overpower two skilled opponents? Fong Ling concluded that the best strategy for Sotan and his ally was to stall and evade, hoping to outlast him. The masked man attempted to retreat, but Fong closed in, declaring he would not allow an escape. As Fong drove him back, the masked man realized the truth. Fong's power was on an entirely different level. A final strike shattered the shield into pieces, sending the masked man crashing into a river. Staggering to his feet, he admitted defeat and tried to flee. But Fong pursued him into the water, his movements unnaturally fluid, faster than anything the masked man had ever seen. The chase ended brutally. Fong leapt from the river with an enraged expression, asking where his prey thought he could run. With one crushing blow, he sent the masked man flying, declaring the game of cat and mouse was finished. His claws elongated, stabbing deep into his opponent's stomach. Blood sprayed as the masked man cried out for his teammate. Fong silenced him by severing his head, telling him to save his last words for hell. As the body dissolved, it transformed into a key, which Fong pocketed without hesitation. Fong Ling's eyes widened in disbelief. People turning into keys upon death? The sight made his stomach twist with fear. If two fighters of such caliber were no match for Fong, then what chance did anyone else have? As Fong Ling gasped quietly to himself, he realized the inevitable. Fong's next step would be to kill everyone else. Meanwhile, Sotan tried to retreat, but Fong gave chase, promising that no one had ever escaped him. In desperation, Sotan shouted defiantly, warning Fong not to underestimate him. Raising his weapon, he activated his firearm technique. Curved paths bullets twisted unnaturally through the air, one finding its mark. Blood burst from Fong as the impact hurled him into a building. Panting and drenched in sweat, Sotan pulled out a firebomb, shouting that they would see if Fong could survive this. He hurled the explosive, and flames engulfed the building in a raging inferno. Believing Fong might still have tricks hidden, Sotan hurried to secure higher ground. But his confidence shattered when he saw Fong walking calmly out of the fire and scathed. Fong's voice carried an edge of irritation as he remarked that Sotan was beginning to annoy him. Fear spread across Sotan's face as he muttered in disbelief, wondering why Fong would not die and what kind of monster he was fighting. Fong's expression turned dark. Channeling a black, sinister power, he deliberately severed two of his own fingers. Smoke seeped from them, and Fong picked one up, imbuing it with his energy. In a blur, he hurled the finger at Sotan with terrifying speed. The projectile pierced Sotan's head, and he collapsed, black smoke erupting from his wound. His body too dissolved into a key, which Fong claimed as his reward. Though victorious, Fong's injuries were evident, and he paused to drink something that helped him recover. As he turned, his gaze lifted toward the building where Fong Ling was hiding. Inside, Fong Ling pressed himself against the wall, a hand over his mouth, sweat dripping down his face. Terror gripped him as he wondered if Fong had sensed his presence. He forced himself into silence, hoping desperately that it was impossible. Then, in the same room, the lifeless girl who had been lying on the floor suddenly gasped for breath. Fong Ling noticed movement in the room. The girl he had believed to be dead gasped for air. She was still alive. His eyes fell on an emergency injection lying on the floor, and in that instant, he realized the truth. She had never actually died. Panic swept over him, because if she made a sound now, both of them would be finished. Fong was still standing just outside the building. He moved quickly, muttering under his breath that she had to stay silent. As the girl began to regain consciousness, Fong Ling clamped a hand over her mouth, whispering a curse as he urged her not to cry out. Analyzing the situation with a grim expression, he realized they could not risk discovery. With his free hand, he gripped the knife still lodged in her chest. Apologizing quietly, he pushed the blade deeper while holding her face, silencing any chance of a scream. Outside, Fong sat on the ground. His monstrous form began to recede, his body shifting back to normal. He paused, turning toward the building. For a moment, It seemed as though he had sensed something inside, perhaps Fong Ling's presence. But after a brief hesitation, he rose, picked up the silver suitcase, and decided to leave. Inside, Fong Ling remained tense, wondering if they had been discovered. He exhaled a long sigh of relief only when Fong walked away, without further inspection. His gaze then returned to the girl's body. Whispering an apology, he admitted to himself that if she had lived, his own death would have been certain. Stepping out of the building, Fong Ling looked frustrated. The silver suitcase was gone, but he resolved to salvage what he could. He began gathering documents scattered across the floor, sorting through them one by one. Every piece of data could matter. When he had collected enough, he secured them, climbed onto his electric bike, and left the scene, thinking that careful analysis of the information might be his only hope for survival. The following day, Fong Ling was walking along a busy street when a sharp cough forced him to stop. Blood filled his mouth, and he quickly wiped it away with a tissue before continuing. Climbing a set of stairs, he reached a door and knocked. A large man with bandaged arms opened it, brushing against him as he passed. Fong Ling peered into the room, then stepped inside. The room was cluttered with boxes and papers scattered across a table. He asked whether Dr. Zhou was there. From a side room, a doctor emerged and demanded to know who had sent him. Fong Ling's expression hardened as he explained that Uncle Xia, known as the car maniac, had told him Zhou could provide items no one else sold. Zhou, unimpressed, asked if he had brought money and told him to place it on the table. As the doctor lit a cigarette, Fong Ling laid down the payment. Zhou inquired what he wanted, listing off hallucinogens, liquid joy, and even a rare product called Poseidon's King No. 1. Fong Ling ignored them all, requesting Eve and Hercules ultranitrogen inhalant, 20 capsules of the former and 2 bottles of the latter. For a moment, Zhou froze, then his face twisted with anger. He demanded to know if Fong Ling was insane, explaining that such a mixture would not bring pleasure but numb nerves, deprive him of sleep, and destroy his kidneys in a matter of years. Fong Ling remained calm, asking whether 2 or 3 years was considered a long time. Zhou looked at him in confusion. Fong Ling then revealed his condition: terminal lung cancer. He explained that he was not seeking entertainment, but simply a way to make his remaining time less painful. The doctor let out a long breath, his anger fading into resignation. He retrieved the requested items and handed Fong Ling a bag. He explained that the capsules were from the Netherlands, stronger when combined with ultranitrogen, but dangerous if misused. No more than 1 capsule at a time, and never more than 3 in a day. Then, placing Fong Ling's money back on the table, Zhou told him to take it and leave, insisting he had no time to waste. Fong Ling walked out carrying the bag. Once outside, he swallowed a pill and used the inhaler, muttering that at least the pain would ease for now. Later, he sat down on his couch, opened his laptop, and said it was time to get serious. His goal was clear: he had to reclaim the silver suitcase from Fong. As he typed, he remembered the strange message he had received. At exactly 12:17 a.m. on the night of the 13th, he was to go to Pier 5 at Huichuan. There, he would find the silver case. He must not arrive early, and he must not arrive late. The message had been explicit. It was his only chance. The next day, police officers arrived at the pier to investigate the destruction left behind. The damage was severe enough to cause unrest across the underworld, and speculation spread quickly. Authorities believe the group responsible for extracting the object from Sweden's Secret Research Institute must hold extraordinary influence. Yet, despite their efforts, they still had no clue about the mysterious attacker. Unbeknownst to them, the very answers they sought rested quietly on the desk of a young boy. Fong Ling sat before scattered documents, scrolling through his phone while reviewing the reports he had retrieved from the pier. His hands rested on the papers as he thought about what he had just read. Again and again, the files mentioned an experimental anti-reverse transcription drug developed in Sweden. It had not yet reached mass production, and the box he had seen at the pier, according to the notes, contained the only copy in existence. The thought unsettled him. Could something so valuable truly exist as a single specimen? Determined to dig deeper, Fong Ling began searching for information on the man known only as Fong. He jotted notes as he studied the details. Judging by his appearance, Fong seemed to be of African descent, though his exact age was unclear, likely between 18 and 40. His abilities, however, were far from ordinary. Reports described how he could transform into a beast, complete with claws sharp enough to tear through human bodies and a physique strong enough to resist even heavy-caliber bullets. But brute strength alone wasn't his only asset. Witness accounts suggested he used flash grenades to disorient enemies, combining tactical skill with sheer power. When Fong Ling reviewed a battle video, he noticed something stranger. Fong appeared capable of unleashing devastating long-range attacks. In one scene, he cut off his own finger, then hurled it with deadly precision. Before doing so, it looked almost like he had performed a ritual. This was no simple throw, it was a technique of enormous power. Still, such power came at a cost. Losing a finger for every use meant the ability could only be employed a limited number of times. Fong Ling judged it to be a trump card, something saved for desperate moments. He noted Fong's overwhelming offense, near-impenetrable defense, and versatile skills. The man seemed unstoppable. Yet, after careful review of the footage, Fong Ling noticed something others had overlooked. When Fong returned to human form, his body appeared visibly weakened. That weakness brought a faint smile to Fong Ling's face. It meant Fong couldn't remain transformed indefinitely. If that duration could be calculated, there might be a way to counter him without engaging head-on. Turning his attention back to the crime scene photos, Fong Ling studied each one until he spotted a recurring symbol. Intrigued, he searched online for its meaning. The results startled him. On the 17th day of the month, Randall, CEO of a leading technology company, would travel to Tai City despite his failing health. The purpose of the trip was to launch a groundbreaking new product, Kaoryong, expected to revolutionize audiovisual technology. Digging further, Fong Ling discovered that Randall had been diagnosed 3 years earlier with a malignant pancreatic tumor but had been receiving treatment ever since. To Fong Ling, this information fit perfectly with the puzzle. He closed his notes, walked to the window, and stared at the city skyline. With cold certainty, he told himself that Fong's story was nearing its end, because the man had to die. Meanwhile, inside the luxurious Landskarten Hotel, Fong himself was preparing for the days ahead. In one of the suites, a silver suitcase sat on the table while the sound of running water echoed from the bathroom. Fong stood beneath the shower, steam curling around him as he let the water wash away the marks of battle. A smile tugged at his lips. His wounds had almost healed. He decided it was time to end his brief vacation and move on. When he emerged from the bathroom, draped in a bathrobe, he poured himself a glass of red wine. Swirling it thoughtfully, he muttered that before leaving, he would enjoy a small celebration. Once his business was finished, he planned to indulge further, with beautiful women to accompany him. The thought amused him, and he downed the glass in one gulp. A knock suddenly interrupted his calm. He frowned and asked who it was. A voice outside replied that it was routine room service. Suspicious, Fong stepped toward the door and crouched to peer through the viewing slot near the floor. The attack came instantly. Something long and sharp pierced the glass, stabbing inward with lethal force. Fong reacted just in time, springing back to avoid being impaled, though the blade scraped across his eye as it passed. His expression twisted into rage as he bared his teeth and demanded to know who dared to attack him. Suddenly, a burst of relentless gunfire erupted from outside the door. Fong reacted instantly, leaping to the side and pressing himself against the wall as the bullets tore through the room. The firing ceased after several seconds, leaving behind an uneasy silence. Then, with a thunderous crash, the entire door gave way, shattering into splinters as 3 men in black suits, each armed with guns, stormed into the room. One of them glanced around with narrowed eyes and demanded in confusion, "Where did everyone go?" Fong, however, was not in plain sight. He had pressed himself against the upper beams of the room, clinging like a predator lying in wait. The intruders scanned the area carefully, aware that someone was still there. Their search was tense, deliberate, as if they knew Fong was above them. A cold smirk spread across Fong's face as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a strange blue sphere. Dangling from it was a grotesque little doll, its eerie grin giving it an unsettling presence. Without hesitation, he hurled it onto the ground. The instant it shattered, flames erupted violently across the room. The men screamed in agony as the fire consumed them, their cries echoing until silence reclaimed the space. When the flames finally died down, Fong dropped back to the ground, his expression calm, yet sinister. The three men lay sprawled and lifeless on the floor. He stood over them, twirling the evil doll between his fingers, and chuckled softly. "Assassins," he muttered mockingly. "Is someone trying to kill me? But sending only 3, isn't that underestimating me?" His grin widened with amusement, but beneath it was cold calculation. This place was now compromised, exposed. Fong decided it was time to leave. The scene then shifted, rewinding to several hours earlier in the scorching sands of Fayum Oasis, Egypt. A massive skeleton stretched across the desert floor, an enormous whale-like creature fossilized by time. From a distance, a man studied the remains with great interest. As is well known, the man remarked, the dragon king whale evolved to possess a unique and completely enclosed vertebral structure. The speaker was seated comfortably in a floating chair, clad in a pristine blue suit. He peered through binoculars, his expression one of fascination and greed. Standing silently beside him was another man in a black suit, his demeanor respectful yet tense. At the junction where the cranial cavity connects to the spinal cord, the man in the chair continued, his tone almost reverent. There is also a unique sealed structure. The bone tissue there is over 1/2 meter thick. His eyes gleamed as he lowered the binoculars, staring directly at the skeleton. A sinister smile curved across his lips. "And if we're lucky enough," he said with a rising excitement, "we might find within the Dragon King whale's sealed cavity remnants of genetic sequences that are still active." That smile twisted darker, dripping with arrogance. "And our company possesses a technological level beyond this era." The man's voice swelled with pride as he spread his arms wide and declared, "Cloning living organisms, curing cancer, even creating zombies, we've already achieved all of it. Therefore, with our company's capabilities, once we obtain the Dragon King whale's genetic code." His tone dropped into a near whisper, filled with deadly certainty. "We will revive it in this era." Suddenly, a computerized hologram flickered into existence beside him. A girl's figure materialized, her digital voice echoing with urgency. "Warning, warning. First sequence, event detected." The man's composure remained unshaken. He turned toward her and said calmly, "Elizabeth, we're in the process of extracting the Dragon King whale's genetic code. You know how important this is. Go gather the rest of the board members." But the holographic girl shook her head, her voice sharp with insistence. "Director Swan, this first sequence event concerns you. It's related to the retroviral vector injection. We've confirmed that someone seriously injured 2 SRT rapid response units, stole the retroviral vector syringe, and went into hiding. The target poses a high-level threat, and the Asian Command Center requests authorization to deploy the zombie bioweapon." Her tone grew more urgent. "The target location is Taichung City, one of the 7 global free ports, with a population of 27 million. At this, the man in the black suit standing beside Swan stiffened in alarm. His face grew pale as he spoke up firmly. "Absolutely not. If we deploy Zombie Weapon B in Taichung and anything goes wrong, we'll be in serious trouble." Swan turned his head slowly, his expression calm but terrifyingly cold. He extended a hand toward the man. "Give it to me." The man hesitated, his voice faltering. "But sir, the consequences." He never finished. In the next instant, his body was blown backward violently, blood spraying through the air. His corpse crumpled lifelessly onto the sand. Swan, still seated comfortably in his floating chair, didn't flinch. He merely muttered, "There was a lot of redundant data earlier. Restart the server." Let's continue the research. Elizabeth's voice rang out again, this time even more mechanical. Activating zombie weapon B requires secondary authorization. Please authorize using voice sprint, Director Swan. The secondary command has been received, and the analytical server is rebooting. The vision shifted into a laboratory, where rows of containment flasks glowed eerily. Inside them, distorted figures twitched, zombies being artificially cultivated. Swan gave his authorization, and the command was executed. One of the creatures opened its eyes within the flask, its consciousness sparking awake for the first time. Meanwhile, back in Taichung, Fong prepared himself carefully. He changed into a black combat outfit, tightening the straps and ensuring every movement was unhindered. His instincts screamed at him suddenly, a prickle of danger crawling down his spine. He turned sharply and froze. Standing before him were three figures, their forms twisted and inhuman. Their flesh bore scars of unnatural experiments, their eyes vacant, yet filled with hunger. Fong narrowed his gaze, muttering under his breath, "These are zombies." In the blink of an eye, his body surged with energy. Muscles expanded, bones cracked, and his entire frame warped as he underwent his orc transformation. His aura darkened, raw strength radiating off him like a storm. "Looks like whoever's trying to kill me isn't an ordinary person," he growled, his tusks gleaming as his voice rumbled with power. A sinister smile tugged at his lips as he took a step forward. "But I'm not ordinary either." The zombies lunged forward, their rotten bodies swaying in grotesque unison. Fong snarled, backing away slightly, his voice sharp with disgust as he barked at them to stay away. "Filthy creatures," he muttered. The first one reached him, only for Fong's fist to meet its skull with crushing force. Its head tore apart like fragile paper, the ruined body collapsing lifelessly onto the floor. Another came at him head-on. Fong spun sharply, meeting it face-to-face before driving his fist into its skull. The impact shattered bone, bursting the head apart in a spray of gore. Without hesitation, Fong turned on the third. His leg whipped out, slamming into its neck with monstrous power. The zombie flew backward, smashing through the wall and out of the building. Fong smirked. "Just a petty trick," he said with cold satisfaction. His beast form dissolved, leaving him standing in his black suit. He glanced at his reflection in a cracked mirror nearby, then straightened, brushing himself off. With no time to dwell, he moved on. The gallery stretched before him in eerie silence, the air unnervingly still. Fong followed the signs toward the exit. That was when a man appeared, staggering toward him, calling desperately for help. His voice trembled, pleading, but only a few steps later his body erupted into flames. Fire consumed him entirely as he screamed, the inferno twisting him into a grotesque, blackened statue of smoldering mud. Instinctively, Fong drew his gun and opened fire. Bullets riddled the burning husk, but it stood unshaken. Fong narrowed his eyes. Firearms are useless against this one. As he reloaded, the man's body began regenerating. Skin and muscle knit themselves back together, though a jagged mark remained seared across his back. From that mark, something tore its way out, a monstrous figure emerging in a grotesque display of flesh and bone. It was a bioweapon, test specimen, the snake that bites its tail, Model B. The monster advanced. Fawn fired again, but the bullets ricocheted harmlessly off its grotesque hide. Snarling, he shed his human form and transformed back into his orc beast state. Muscles bulged, claws extended, and with a thunderous roar he launched himself at the monster. They collided in a brutal clash, Fong's raw strength meeting the bioweapon's overwhelming force. With sheer power, Fong gripped the creature's head in both hands and crushed it, the skull splattering like overripe fruit. But victory was short-lived. A thick green fluid burst from the ruined head, sizzling as the monster's skull reformed before Fong's eyes. He growled in frustration. In another blur of motion, he ripped the head apart again, refusing to waste time. The monster wasn't immortal. He only needed to end this quickly before more enemies showed themselves. Suddenly, One of the beast's limbs twisted and stretched unnaturally, hardening into a sharp spike. It shot forward, piercing Fong's chest. Blood sprayed, but with a roar Fong slashed it apart with his claws and staggered back. The wound burned, but he didn't falter. He bolted toward the garage, clutching his chest. A hole gaped where the spike had pierced him, but there was no time to rest. Inside, a bike rested beneath a cloth. Fong tore the cover away, but footsteps echoed from above. Assassins emerged from the stairs, weapons drawn, their guns gleaming under the dim light. They surrounded him, one of them barking the order. Fire! Bullets rained down, but Fong leapt, his beastly agility carrying him high to the rafters. In a heartbeat, he dropped down like a predator, both fists slamming into one assassin with crushing force. The man's body crumpled instantly. Fong tore through the rest, claws and brute strength dismantling them one by one until silence reclaimed the garage. Breathing heavily, Fong let his beast form dissolve once more. Blood stained his suit, but he climbed onto the bike and revved the engine. Tires screeched as he shot out of the building, disappearing into the night. Far away, in a dimly lit control room, a man watched through surveillance feeds. His blonde hair glowed under the screen's reflection, one eye covered by a black eye patch. His expression was calm, but his voice carried authority as he analyzed the battle. His combat skills exceeded all expectations, the man remarked. He was Wilson, executive director of the Asia division at Manhwa Corporation. Leaning closer to the monitor, Wilson smirked. Even the bioweapon, Model B, didn't last 10 seconds against him. That settles it. Authorize the upgrade to rank A+. His tone sharpened, eyes narrowing with predatory intent. Let's see if he survives this time. He pressed a button on the mic before him, his order echoing coldly through the room. Keep a close eye on his movements. Once he enters a sparsely populated area, he paused, savoring the moment. Release the cleaner. Night draped itself across the city as Fong rode his motorcycle through the empty streets, the roar of the engine echoing against the tall buildings. His sharp eyes scanned the road ahead, but he already sensed trouble lurking in the shadows. Inside a surveillance hub, Wilson observed his every move through a bank of monitors. His voice cut sharply through the room as he issued his commands. Yangtze Avenue had been locked down. No more than 17 civilians remained within the perimeter. The situation, he declared, was under control. He ordered the drones to launch, Fong's vehicle to be destroyed, and the field team informed. Then his voice lowered, carrying a weight of intent. Activate the cleaner. This man hides many secrets. Try to keep him alive if possible. Back on the streets, Fong realized that his enemies were already closing in. Helicopters thundered overhead, their blades slicing through the night sky. His expression darkened. It's far from over, he muttered. Frustration burned in his chest as he gritted his teeth. Memories clawed at him. If Selena had not been assassinated in the previous world, if she still possessed her spiritual tendrils that could distinguish friend from foe, he would not be in this miserable situation now. The bitterness of loss weighed heavy on him, even as danger closed in. Wilson, relentless, issued new orders. His men were told to intercept Fong at the front and prepare the cleaner. The team nodded without hesitation. One of the helicopters dropped a massive container directly onto Fong's path. He swerved, pulling hard on the brakes, barely avoiding being crushed beneath the falling steel. Smoke hissed from the sealed container as Wilson announced over comms that the cleaner protocol had officially begun. Inside, systems activated one after another. Unlocking procedures started. Freezer temperatures rose. Defrosting solutions were injected into the chamber. A mechanical voice listed the compounds as they coursed through the figure within: nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate, potassium magnesium aspartate, high-energy mixture type 2, and ACTH compound. Fong's eyes widened as smoke erupted violently from the container. A hand emerged, clawing its way out, followed by a monstrous figure. The cleaner had awakened. The beast's cold, inhuman eyes immediately locked onto Fong astride his motorcycle. It began scanning him, analyzing every movement. The order was clear. Locate the target, capture him immediately. Then it lunged. Fong's instincts flared. He revved the bike and sped forward, muttering, "I can't face him head-on. I need to retreat quickly." Yet even as he tried to flee, the cleaner moved ahead with impossible speed, blocking his escape. Its metallic voice resonated in the night. Target acquired. Fong cursed under his breath. This was bad. The cleaner struck, destroying Fong's motorcycle in a single crushing blow. The impact hurled Fong through the air, sending him rolling violently across the ground. He scrambled back onto his knees, blood smearing across his skin. But before he could catch his breath, the cleaner launched itself at him again, soaring from above. Fong's survival instincts ignited. He activated his orc beast transformation. A blazing aura swirled around him as he invoked Jacob's blood, its activation unleashing raw energy. His body twisted further as he unleashed a second transformation, becoming a towering giant wolf. His growl rumbled like thunder. "You're dead now," he snarled. In his monstrous form, Fong lunged forward, sinking his fangs into the cleaner. Blood sprayed across the ground. But the beast retaliated, slamming its fist across Fong's face, the blow shaking even his transformed frame. From the surveillance hub, Wilson's eyes gleamed with intrigue. The fight was unfolding even better than expected. He ordered the cleaner to bring Fong back alive. The two titans clashed furiously, launching blow after blow in a whirlwind of speed and brutality. From above, a helicopter pilot gasped at the sheer destructive power being unleashed below. Over the comms, a sharp announcement rang out. "Body tremor detected. All units, be alert." On the ground, Fong managed to drive the cleaner down, smashing it into the earth. Yet, victory came at a cost. One of his arms was mangled, blood gushing freely. The battlefield was painted crimson, both Fong and the cleaner drenched in gore. Breathing heavily, Fong staggered and muttered, "I didn't expect taking this thing down would be so exhausting," but then a sharp pain struck him deep within. His body convulsed as realization dawned. A parasite. He froze in disbelief, wondering when it had happened. Before he could recover, another metallic groan filled the street. Another container was opening. Smoke billowed once more. Fong's eyes widened with fury. "You've got to be kidding me, another one?" His growl deepened. "Best option, run." Wilson's orders rang out coldly. "Elizabeth, deploy cleaner number 11. Elizabeth nodded without hesitation, initializing the next protocol. Monitors flickered as data streams began to pour in. "Detected a sharp decline in the target's condition," she reported. "Most likely his energy is running out. Recommend immediate capture." The second container burst open, and from within emerged another abomination. Cleaner number 11 stood taller, stronger, more terrifying than the first. Its presence alone carried a weight of dread. Wilson's gave his final order: capture Fong, and recover the silver case intact. The night grew heavier, the city trembling as Fong faced an even greater monster than before.